Madam President, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Senator McKinney, Representative Cafaro, distinguished members of the General Assembly, thank you for inviting me back to your House. I'd also like to recognize my wife, Kathy, and my son, Dannel, who are joining us as well today. To those of you watching on TV or online or listening on the radio, thank you for taking the time to tune in. 6 weeks ago, I had the honor of addressing you on the day I was sworn in as Connecticut's 88th governor. When I stood before you back in January, I talked about crisis and opportunity, of standing at a crossroads of historic proportions, of having to choose a path forward. I called for innovative thinking and for us to muster up the intellectual, emotional, and political courage to take a different path, a better path on behalf of the people of the state of Connecticut. I then invoked the renowned poet Robert Frost, a fellow New Englander, when he wrote The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and it has made all the difference. So today, as I am here to present my budget, I want to take you on a road less traveled, but one that I believe will make all the difference. Let me start by sharing some thoughts that I hope will make the state budget more real and more relevant. Our state's budget can make the difference between hunger and hope for a family on the brink of homelessness, the difference between failure and opportunity for a child taking his first steps, the difference between despair and dignity for an aging senior, the difference between peril and security for anyone walking our streets or traveling our highways. Everything I've just described can be found in a line item in the budget. But the sum of those items must have meaning as well. And unless that meaning is clear, the line items and the sum are of no lasting consequence. Ladies and gentlemen, the meaning can be summed up in one word: jobs. Without jobs, government's resources will dry up, its programs will become exhausted, and the relief they provide will be temporary and of no lasting effect. Jobs, ladies and gentlemen, represent the light at the end of the budget tunnel. That's why job creation drives this budget. The reorganizations and restructuring we announced last week were done in part to help make state agencies and the people who work in them more responsive to the needs of the business community. I've asked every member of the Bond Commission, and I ask everyone in this room, when you ask me to put something on the bond agenda, I'll ask you, how many jobs will it create? And I'm proposing that any surplus that we have this year, and currently projected at $43 million, be dedicated to reducing the so-called securitization, which is really just a way to tax us on our electric bills. These bills are already too high, and I will make sure that we reduce that tax as much as possible. This will lower the cost of doing business in Connecticut, and it will provide relief for every homeowner and renter who pays an electric bill. Let me put it this way. From this day forth, state government will exist to help create jobs, not simply to perpetuate itself. With job creation on our minds, several principles and philosophies helped guide us towards this day. But the one overarching concept that we kept in mind is one I called shared sacrifice. The people of Connecticut are good and decent and hard-working people. I believe that they are willing to make sacrifices if they understand why they're being asked to do so. And if they believe that Connecticut is serious about fixing what's wrong. Why do I think that? Because despite the challenges we face, I sense a renewed optimism in the air. I sense that people believe change has arrived. I sense that people are waiting to be led to a better tomorrow. I should say that two other principles that guided us were fairness and decency. Those principles are best exemplified by the fact that even though we are asking people at the lower end of the economic spectrum to make some sacrifices, we are also treating them fairly. How, you might ask? Well, I am proposing that we enact a robust earned income tax credit of 30%. For a low-income family of four, this credit will mean an additional $1,700 a year in their pockets. For those who won't take a low-wage job in the hopes that something better will come along, this is an incentive to take that job, because you will only get this credit if you are, in fact, working. Ladies and gentlemen, this is money for food, for medicine, for oil to heat people's homes. It's money for the basics that many of us take for granted. It's fair, it's decent, it's good public policy, it's the right thing to do, and its time has come. What else can government do? It can foster a climate in which the private sector can do what it does best: create jobs. And to do that, state government must get its fiscal house in order. Right now, we're in pretty tough shape. We're staring down the barrel of a deficit of $3.2 billion next year and over $3 billion in year two. At approximately 20% of revenue, this places us among the hardest pressed states in the nation. So how do we address this fiscal crisis? First, we cannot spend any more money. That's why the base spending in the general fund next year is actually lower than the spending this year. In fact, this budget reduces the spending that would have been required to maintain a current services budget by $1.8 billion. Second principle. Second, we borrow not one penny for operating expenses. Too much borrowing over the years for ongoing expenses is one of the reasons we're in the bad shape we're in. Third, this budget fully funds our pension obligations. Too many years of deferring too many of our obligations is another reason we're in the shape we're in. Now let's talk about what this budget does do. First, and I want everyone to hear this loud and clear, this budget says Connecticut is open for business. We are open for business. And it does so in two significant ways. To begin with, it makes a substantial direct investment in job creation. We are combining our economic development efforts under one agency so we can have a single, powerful voice when it comes to attracting, retaining, and growing jobs in Connecticut. And that voice will have some new things to say, like our new First Five initiative that will offer powerful incentives to the first 5 companies that bring hundreds of jobs to Connecticut. This program takes our best job creation tools like the Reinvestment Tax Credit, the Manufacturing Assistance Act, and the Job Creation Tax Credit, and allows them to be combined and the benefits increased for companies that bring more than 200 jobs to the state. And we will hold these first 5 to their commitments with mechanisms to ensure that the jobs and the investments we support will last. To these first companies that we make this commitment to and make a commitment to us, we say welcome and let's get to work. The second thing this budget does is restructure state government by making it leaner, cheaper, and a better partner to the business community. Through consolidation and outright elimination, we've reduced the number of budgeted state agencies from 82 to 58. That's a 30% reduction. Getting there was not easy, but it was necessary, and let me illustrate why. Right now, we have 7 separate state governmental entities that deal with energy. You know it, and I know it. That's 6 too many. This budget proposes that we have one government entity to develop and administer energy policy. We have more than 10 agencies whose job it is to make sure that other agencies do their job. Now, I thought that was my job, and I thought it was your job. You see, we simply cannot sustain this government in its present form. It's too expensive, and we don't have the money to do it. And by the way, even if we had the money to do it, we shouldn't do it. Here's something you need to know about me. I don't think government should always spend every cent it has simply because it still has that cent. Here's another thing you need to know about me. I'm not one of those people who dislikes government. In fact, I think government has done great things in the past and can do great things in the future, but not in the form that we found Connecticut's government in. To be clear, this budget asks those of us who work in government to share the sacrifices that need to be made. Knowing that I would be asking others to sacrifice, I felt that I should lead by example. That's why the governor's staff has been reduced by 15%. That's why I eliminated longevity payments for the people I've asked to serve in my administration. I did those things first because they're the right thing to do, and second because you can't ask others to make sacrifices if you're not willing to do so yourself. And this budget proposal does ask state employees to make sacrifices. Now, I know they've made them in the past, and I appreciate those sacrifices. And I appreciate the good and hard work they do every day. And I hope that you do as well. But I need to ask them to do what I'm asking everyone else in this state to do: more. Because their current wage, health care, and pension benefit levels are simply not sustainable. To that end, this budget proposes $2 billion in real savings concessions from state employees over the next 2 years. Now, some of these savings can be achieved by implementing common sense proposals, such as moving state employees to a health benefit package like the one that federal employees have. That change alone could save the state over $100 million over the next 2 years. Another change would be involved in asking state employees to do what President Obama has asked federal employees to do: accept a wage freeze. Over 2 years, that would save us close to $300 million. Extending 3 furlough days per year over the next 2 years would save us $80 million. Adjusting the retirement age would save us close to $300 million. Other changes, like freezing longevity payments and modestly increasing medical copays for unnecessary emergency room visits, would save the state millions more. These are only some of the ways that we can get to that $2 billion figure. There are many others. But let me be clear. We have to get to that number. My administration has received some ideas from state employees and union leaders, which have the potential to save the state some money. And I appreciate those ideas, but they're not nearly enough. The time has come for the next step, and that is to begin discussions regarding concessions. Now, I don't make these suggestions to be antagonistic, just realistic. The alternative to $2 billion figure would require us to completely shred the safety net for our fellow citizens. And it would require us to lay off thousands of state workers, which is to say there is no alternative. We have to get it done, and I'm confident we will get it done. We have to. The fact that it took me now this long to get to the revenue side of this speech is a reflection of the process that we went through in developing the budget. First, we downsized government. Then we cut spending. Then we identified what we needed to ask our state employees to do. And only when those three processes were complete did we begin to look at revenue. Once we got there, we again adhered to a few principles, beginning with shared sacrifice. Asking virtually everyone to share a slightly higher tax burden is the only way that we can ensure that no one group of people bears a much higher burden. Second, we maintain a competitive advantage over our neighboring states. So while the sales tax is going up by 0.25%, that still leaves us with a lower sales tax than our neighboring states. Third, while I do believe in a progressive income tax, I do not believe that we should punish success or wealth. That's why taxes will rise on income over $1 million by 0.2% on top of the increases that you have passed previously. And fourth, and simply put, is fairness. Now, to look at the sales tax, for example, and to see how certain items are taxed while others are not, is to understand the corrosive influence that special interests have had on our state government. For example, we tax Pilates studios, but we don't tax yoga studios. Now, forgive me, but if anyone can explain that and give me a good reason, I'd be interested in hearing it. Is it because yoga people have a better lobbyist? Quite frankly, it's ridiculous. We tax people who use valet parking, unless they happen to be parking at an airport. Is there a reasonable explanation for that? If so, I'd love to hear it. In the end, the revenues we propose to raise are broad-based. They adhere to principles we've laid out, and in total they amount to less than the cuts in spending that we are proposing. And so there you have it. That's how I propose to balance our budget. No new overall spending, a fundamental restructuring of state government, real savings from state employees, new revenues. Now, so far I've mostly spoken of the challenges we face and the difficult decisions we need to make to meet those challenges. Now let's talk about some good news. And let's start with talking about the way the state keeps its books. This budget begins the process of moving Connecticut state government to generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. For those who are watching or listening and who may not be familiar with that term, everyone here is, it means that we're finally going to require the state to do what it requires all 196 cities and towns to do. We need to be honest and transparent about the way we keep our books. Now, there's more good news in the form of some of the investments and down payments that this budget makes in some important areas. It must be dismaying to us all that Connecticut has the largest achievement gap of any state in the nation, that so many of our children are falling behind without ever getting the chance to get ahead is something that we cannot tolerate. That's why, despite the fiscal challenges we face, I refuse to put additional burden on cities and towns by reducing funding for local education. Last year, local education was funded with $270 million of one-time revenue. That money is gone, leaving a gaping hole. We filled that hole completely, and we should be proud of it. But while we're proud of that achievement, we also need to recognize that the ECS formula needs to be overhauled. It's broken, and we all know it. To that end, I will soon be reaching out to legislative leadership and to relevant stakeholders to form a committee to recommend smart steps that we can take to overhaul the way we fund local education. I'm asking this committee to begin convening at the end of the school year and to report back to me no later than October 1st. Then I'll seek to take that report and turn it into legislation in the next session. We need to fix this formula once and for all, and we will. One of the other ways we can close the achievement gap is by giving every child in this state, irrespective of their family's income, a chance to have a pre-kindergarten learning experience. Too many of our children today don't get that chance, meaning they are simply too often not ready to learn when they begin school, which means they're behind before they even get started. As mayor of Stamford, I made pre-kindergarten education a reality for every child in the city. As governor, I'd like to do the same for every child in the state. While I acknowledge we don't have the money to do that today, we do have the money to make a down payment on that dream. And this budget does that to the tune of $5.7 million over 2 years. This state investment will leverage approximately $4.1 million from private philanthropic sources, including the Graustein and Annie Casey Foundations, as well as the Child Health and Development Institute. I'm proud of that collaboration. Now let's talk about education reform. Too often over the years, people have been labeled pro-reform or pro-teacher. I reject that false choice. I'm both pro-reform, as long as it doesn't mean teacher bashing, and I'm pro-teacher, as long as it does not mean maintaining the status quo. We cannot maintain the status quo, and everyone in this chamber should know it. That's why I'm proposing reform of teacher tenure rules to give local school districts the flexibility they need to retain new, talented teachers. That's why I'm proposing we invest more than $2 million to start to build the student data and teacher accountability system that we committed to last year. That's why this budget proposes $60 million additional dollars for magnet schools to provide for more than 8,000 additional seats. $6.5 million for 747 additional charter school seats, $7.2 million for more than 1,300 new seats in the open choice program, and $50,000 to fund REST to study ways that we can save money by regionalizing our transportation systems. I am also proposing that we begin the process of transferring state vocational technical schools to local districts and regions that host them. These schools are a valuable option for families and students in districts across the state, and I want to share the strength of these institutions with those districts where it might best be directed. These are all important investments, and I'm committed to making them happen. But before we leave this discussion of primary and secondary education, I want to issue a challenge to teachers, administrators, and custodians of this state. We have done our part in increasing funding for education, but we need all of you to step to the plate, as some of you already have. I'm asking that you not take this additional $270 million in funding for education and use it to demand raises. That surely will result in some of your colleagues losing their jobs or having larger classroom sizes. Let's be honest, all that would accomplish is more people out of work and more students per teacher. And I want to say this, please don't take that as a threat. It is not. It is a respectful request that reflects the realities of our times. Look, I would not be standing here as the governor but for the teachers I was fortunate to have as a young child. They, along with my mother's love and hard work, helped me overcome some pretty severe learning disabilities. I know teachers do heroic work, and I salute and admire them for it. But in these difficult times, we need to ask that you too share in the sacrifices we are all making. Now, I have to say that no discussion of education would be complete without discussing higher education. Last week, as you know, I proposed a complete overhaul of the state university and community college system, all with an eye towards giving each campus the flexibility it needs to better serve its students. I'm confident these changes will allow us to focus our resources more directly at the goal that should be at hand, graduating more students and graduating them in 2 and 4 years. That's what we need to do. I will acknowledge that this budget asks our colleges and universities to step up just as the rest of state government must be in these difficult times. But most importantly, I think in some senses, is that we are preserving their independence. I firmly believe that the University of Connecticut and the new regents will demonstrate the creativity, the intelligence, and the resolve to live within their block grants without raising tuition beyond the inflation rate. There's more good news in this budget. As proud as I am that we are fully funding the ECS grant, I'm equally proud of the fact that this budget does not cut overall funding for cities and towns. In fact, it increases it by nearly $100 million in the first year and even more in the second. My budget also reflects my long-standing commitment to supporting local services through property tax reform. We accomplish this by providing significant new revenues for cities and towns with 0.1% sales tax on retail sales that will be returned to the towns where it is collected. That would raise $24 million. I'm also including a similar provision for hotel tax and the tax on car rental and expanding the local conveyance tax. Local governments are facing the same pressures as state government, and we need to help them find a way to stability, just as we are doing on the state level. As a former mayor, I simply refuse to balance the state's budget on the backs of local property tax payers. Another challenge we face in this state is transportation. And listen, coming from Fairfield County, I can assure you that there were times that I thought gridlock was a 4-letter word. But our transportation problems are surely not limited to the southwestern portion of our state. They extend to virtually every corner of Connecticut. That's why we've committed the funds necessary for 38 new rail cars for Metro North and Shoreline East, and why, unlike in previous budget proposals, we are fully funding our other rail lines, and we're holding the line on new fare increases for bus and rail usage. Also, we are going to make a fundamental change in the way that we account for the fund transportation, by making sure that all of the taxes we collect for gasoline and diesel fuel used in transportation are used to meet our transportation needs. That means 70% of our gross receipts tax now going to support our roads and bridges. We'll do more next year, but this is a good start. We can't leave today without discussing public safety. Let's start by acknowledging that we have one of the lowest crime rates we've had, the lowest crime rate we've had in Connecticut since the mid-1970s. And join me in saluting the brave men and women who wear the uniform every day and have helped make this happen. Having said that, we all do know about the troubling number of incidences involving young people in our cities, people shooting and killing each other, often for no reason at all. Lives are being lost, families are being ripped apart, and children are growing up fatherless. It has to stop. That's why I'm committed to working in partnership with our city police chiefs, mayors, and community activists to turn the tide on neighborhood violence. I should also say that despite reforms of the past decade, we are still spending money that we don't need to spend imprisoning people who, if given access to treatment, they would pose no threat to any of us. And let me be very clear, I truly believe that they can eventually become productive members of our society. There are simply too many people also who've been arrested and jailed for minor nonviolent or drug offenses, who, if given access to alternative forms of punishment, would take advantage of that additional chance to choose a different and better path. Now, this new policy will save us millions of dollars, which is a benefit, I believe, of a more enlightened policy whose time has also come. One final note before I leave this issue. I'm committed to making the concept of the criminal justice information system a reality. That's why I've made sure that $8 million you authorized was put on the most recent bond agenda. Once this system is fully implemented, the various agencies, boards, and commissions that comprise the criminal justice system will be better positioned to avoid some of the mistakes and tragedies that have occurred in recent years. We can protect the people of Connecticut while adhering to our principles that our society should once again be a second chance society, and we must make it happen. Finally, this budget also moves Connecticut forward on the issue of public health. I'm proposing that we convert our Medicaid programs to a self-insured model so that we can implement the best practices that I believe will save us $80 million per year. We've added smoking cessation to the services covered by Medicaid. And we are resisting eliminating optional services like dentistry and eyeglasses that too many states are embracing in this difficult environment. And we'll squeeze more federal revenue out of our provider tax for nursing homes and direct that money to those homes themselves so that they can continue to provide care for our neediest seniors. Now, I'm committed to making Connecticut a healthier state. And these investments will help us get there. But we will get there. We've got to get there. We've got to take care of our citizens and protect that safety net. Before I leave you today, I want to make two final points. The first is that I want you to know that I am committed to working with anyone and everyone in this chamber in a collaborative process, as long as you share my commitment to passing a budget that adheres to the basic principles I laid out today. Hold the line on spending. Real restructuring of state government, real savings from state employees, fairness when it comes to raising revenue, and some important down payments on the future. If you share those principles, I welcome your partnership in this effort. The second point is this. I applaud every single one of you for your willingness to serve our communities and our state. I believe deeply that public service is an honor and a privilege, and I know that all of you do as well. But we are not here just to serve. We are here because we have a moral obligation to make this state a better place for our having lived and served in it. Yes, we are facing enormous challenges, but we also have an historic opportunity, an opportunity to renew the people's faith that in their government, and to have them understand that we can do great things. I believe government can do great things. We can create a more competitive business climate that will result in job growth and economic revival. We can provide a better education for every child in this state. We can create a 21st century transportation system. We can and will protect our citizens. We can provide peace of mind and provide better access to quality and affordable health care. We can do all of these things and more if we have the courage to make the hard decisions we need to make today and to seize the many opportunities that will shape our future. You know, it really is like what Harriet Beecher Stowe noted about crisis and opportunity when she said, when you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, till you seem as though you could not hang on a minute longer, never give up, for that is the time that the tide will turn. I truly believe that Connecticut's best days are ahead. The tide is turning for us if we step up and work hard with courage and conviction, and I hope you agree. We are here for a purpose. This is our time to do what we were elected to do, to fix what's broken once and for all. Please join me in that effort, and God bless you, God bless the state of Connecticut, God bless the United States of America.